This is Sarah. To the titans of industry striding through the halls of Oracorp, she was basically a ghost in a beige cardigan. A background character. Most people just knew her as the clumsy secretary, a woman who seemed way more likely to cause a tiny, inconvenient disaster than to ever do anything important. She was better at spilling coffee than closing deals, better at dropping files than driving growth. But in just 3 days, the most powerful people in this billion-dollar company, the same executives who never bothered to learn her last name, were about to learn a humbling, terrifying lesson. The one person they never even saw was the only one who could save them all. The quietest person in the room was about to make the most noise. And it all started with a single, forgotten file that should have stayed buried deep in the company's past. If you love stories about the underdog, the person everyone overlooks, finally getting the justice they deserve, then you are in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and stick around, because this is a story you won't want to miss. Sarah Miller pretty much lived in the margins. Her life was a string of quiet apologies and small, awkward accidents. This Tuesday, her day kicked off as it usually did, with a mini catastrophe. Juggling her worn-out satchel, a mug of tea, and her security pass, she fumbled at the sleek glass gates of the Oracorp Tower. Her pass slipped right out of her fingers, skittering under the gate just as it hissed shut. A line of impatient vice-presidents in sharp suits quickly formed behind her, their shared sigh a cold wave of disapproval. Heat crept up her neck as she got on her hands and knees, the cold marble floor chilling her palms to grab the stupid piece of plastic. Someone muttered, "For heaven's sake," and a security guard had to swipe his MasterCard just to let the growing line of important people through. When Sarah finally got up clutching her pass, she whispered, "Sorry, so sorry," to a bunch of backs that had already turned away. This was Sarah's brand. Clumsy Sarah, the woman who once tripped over absolutely nothing and sent a perfectly sorted stack of board meeting presentations flying like corporate confetti. The woman who had a special talent for dripping ketchup from her lunch onto the one truly irreplaceable document on her desk. She was good at her job, sure, but her physical presence was a constant, low-grade hazard. But what the executives and her coworkers never saw was the world behind Sarah's apologetic eyes. Her clumsiness with the physical world was the complete opposite of her grace with the world of details. While her body sometimes failed her, her mind was a fortress of order. Her desk was a perfectly organized oasis in the chaos of the 42nd floor. Pens were lined up in parallel, paper clips were sorted by size and color, and the mess of computer cables under her desk was carefully tamed with labeled zip ties. While others saw a clumsy woman, they missed the sharp observer who noticed when the plant in the lobby was drooping 3 degrees more than yesterday, or when the CEO's favorite sparkling water was swapped with a cheaper brand. Her mind loved patterns, logic, and above all, things being correct. An error, no matter how small, was like a piece of grit in her shoe on irritation she just couldn't ignore. She was basically invisible to the power players at Oracorp. The company was a giant in the tech and investment world, a billion-dollar machine fueled by ambition and caffeine. Its hallways echoed with confident footsteps and talks full of acronyms and market projections. In this world, Sarah was just part of the furniture. Executives would walk past her desk, barking orders without making eye contact, often calling her the secretary or "on a good day, hun." The worst offender was the CFO, Mr. Caspian Sterling. He was the company's golden boy, a man practically sculpted from charisma and ambition, with a smile that could charm investors and a stare that could freeze an employee's blood. He never spoke to Sarah, only at her, his requests feeling like commands from a king. To him, she was a function, not a person, her direct boss. A perpetually stressed manager named Frank Davies saw her as a walking, talking risk of a minor HR incident. His instructions to her were always delivered with a tired sigh, as if just talking to her was a burden she was bound to screw up. Sarah, he said, that Tuesday afternoon, dropping a heavy key on her desk, it landed with a thud, scattering her perfectly aligned sticky notes. Those old paper archives from Innovate Dynamics, the firm we bought last year, are still in storage room. See, the deal's done. Everything's been migrated. We need that space. I need you to go down there, box it all up, and label it for confidential shredding. Got it? Don't waste time reading the stuff. It's all dead history. Just box and label. It was a grunt work assignment. A job for the lowest person on the totem pole. A dusty, thankless task in the building's sub-basement. Of course, Frank, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Storage room C was a tomb of forgotten business. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and stale air conditioning. Metal shelves groaned under the weight of hundreds of identical cardboard boxes. It was Sarah's job to be the undertaker. For hours, she worked in silence, the only sounds being the scrape of cardboard and the squeak of a rolling ladder. The work was boring, physical, and in a weird way, comforting. Down here in the quiet dust, there were no executives to disappoint, no coffee to spill. It was just her and the job. Then it happened. In true Sarah fashion, reaching for a box on the top shelf, her foot slipped. She flailed, her arms pinwheeling, trying to get her balance. The box she was holding tipped, its contents, dozen heavy accounting ledgers rained down onto the concrete floor with a series of loud thuds. Honestly, she muttered, her face burning with embarrassment, even though no one was there. She knelt down and started gathering the scattered books. As she picked up two ledgers that had fallen open, side by side, her eyes caught something. A detail so small, anyone else would have missed it. A 6-digit invoice number, 815-2, to be dot in the left ledger. Under a project called Helios, invoice 8152 to be was listed with a payment of $45,000 to a vendor named DataLink Solutions. Under a totally different project, Odyssey, the exact same invoice number, 8152 to be, was listed again. But this time, the payment was for $48,500. The vendor was a company she'd never heard of. Apex Logistics. Her brain just stopped. It was wrong. It was like a book with 2-page 74s. A duplicate invoice number could be a typo, maybe. But for the same number to be used by two different vendors for two different projects with two different amounts, the coincidence felt out. It was a sour note in an otherwise silent room. She sat back on her heels, the dusty ledgers in her lap. Frank's voice echoed in her head. Don't waste time reading it. Just box it. Anyone else would have done exactly that. They'd have tossed the ledgers back in the box, sealed it, and moved on. But for Sarah, whose mind was a finely tuned instrument for spotting problems, this was something she couldn't unsee. The pattern was broken, without even thinking. She carefully tore the 2 pages from their bindings, folded them neatly, and slipped them into her satchel. It was against the rules, a clear violation of the shredding protocol. But that tiny, nagging feeling of wrongness was too powerful to ignore. She didn't know what she'd found. A mistake? A fluke? But as she stood up and looked at the mountain of forgotten boxes around her, a shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't just a typo. This was a thread. And her mind, built for untangling knots, felt an irresistible urge to pull it. The next morning, those 2 folded pages sat on Sarah's desk like a pair of accusing eyes. The office light seemed too bright, the chatter too loud. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She'd spent the whole night staring at the ceiling, the 2 invoice numbers burning in her mind. It was probably nothing. A clerical error from 10 years ago. She was being silly, paranoid. She was just the clumsy secretary. What did she know about accounting? But the itch wouldn't go away. It was the feeling of a puzzle piece jammed into the wrong spot. Mustering all her courage, she picked up the papers and walked the terrifyingly short distance to Frank Davies's office. His door was ajar. He hung up the phone, rubbing his temples. "What is it, Sarah?" he asked, not even looking up. "I know you said not to read the files, and I'm so sorry, but I found something a little odd," she started, her voice shaking. She held out the pages. "It's from the Innovate Dynamics archive. This invoice number. It's used twice, for different vendors and different amounts." Frank glanced at the papers with zero interest. He didn't even take them. He leaned back in his chair, looking utterly exhausted. "Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "what did I tell you? Your job was to box the files. Not to play detective? Not to run an amateur audit on a defunct company's decade-old paperwork? I know. But it seems... He cut her off, his voice getting harder. Like you're looking for ways to waste my time. It's a typo. A filing mistake. An error made by someone who probably doesn't even work there anymore. The company was absorbed, its books were checked, and our auditors signed off on everything. Do you honestly think you, in 5 minutes, found something a team of professional accountants missed? The unspoken answer was a loud and clear no. He made her feel like a kid showing a doodle to a parent doing their taxes. I just thought it should be looked at, she mumbled, her cheeks burning. You thought wrong, he snapped. I have a dozen real fires to put out today. A misplaced decimal point from 2015 isn't one of them. Now, go back to the storage room, finish the job I gave you, and shred it. All of it. Understand? She understood. She was being told to get back in her box. Defeated, she walked back to her desk, the pages now feeling like proof of her own stupidity. But she couldn't let it go. His dismissal, the way he'd waved her off, didn't just embarrass her. It lit a tiny, defiant spark inside her. He hadn't even looked. He dismissed her, not the evidence. And so, the obsession began. That evening, long after the last executive had swept out, Sarah was still at her desk. The office was dark except for the glow of her monitor. Armed with her low-level security clearance, she started digging. She wasn't an accountant, but she was methodical. Using the company's clunky, outdated digital archivist system. No one else had the patience for she started cross-dash referencing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She pulled up the Innovate Dynamics payment database and searched for Apex Logistics. The ghost vendor. Nothing. Then she tried a wildcard search for any vendor with Apex in the name. A hit. Apex Project Solutions. Another search. Apex Global. Another. Apex Consulting. It was a web of shell companies. Dozens of them. They all had different names but a similar billing pattern. They all submitted invoices for plausible-sounding services. But when she cross-referenced them with the project logs, she saw it. Oracorp had paid a well-known vendor for a service, and then, a few weeks later, they had paid one of the Apex companies a similar amount for what looked like the same service. A double payment cleverly disguised. And the most damning part, the payments were always just under $50,000. She remembered hearing 2 accountants complain that any payment over 50 grand required a senior level sign-off and was automatically flagged for review. These payments were designed to fly right under the radar. Individually, they were just noise. But together, she ran a quick calculation. Over the past 5 years, across all the shell companies, the total came to over $90 million. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a mistake. This was a sophisticated, long-running heist. Her hands were shaking. Who could authorize this? With a sense of dread, she started digging into the payment authorization logs. Each fake payment had a digital signature, and on every single one, she found the same 3 initials. C.S. Caspian Sterling. The air left her lungs. It couldn't be. The CFO, the golden boy. The man whose picture was in the annual report, praised for his financial genius. It was him. He wasn't cutting costs. He was cutting himself a piece at the company. A wave of nausea hit her. This was so much bigger than a clerical error. This could shatter the company. She looked at the data on her screen, the web of lies and theft, felt a terrifying mix of horror and, strangely, vindication. She wasn't crazy. She was right. The next day, she knew she couldn't go to Frank. This was too big. She had to bypass the chain of command. She had to talk to Mr. Sterling himself. It was the most terrifying decision of her life. She spent the morning rehearsing what to say, her hands getting clammy. She printed out a single, damning page, a side-by-side comparison showing a legitimate payment and a nearly identical fraudulent one to Apex Logistics. Both authorized by CS, it was the clearest proof she saw her chance just after lunch. Sterling was walking from his office toward the elevators alone. It was now or never. Her heart pounded as she stepped into his path. "Mr. Sterling?" She squeaked. He stopped, his eyes sweeping over her as if trying to place a piece of furniture that had been moved. "Yes, I'm Sarah Miller," she stammered, holding out the paper like a shield. "I need to show you something. I found a discrepancy in some of the old payment logs." He took the paper, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He glanced at it. For one tiny second, Sarah saw it, a tightening around his eyes, a flash of pure, cold panic. Then it was gone, replaced by a mask of charming condescension. "A discrepancy?" He chuckled, but the sound had no warmth. "Young lady, do you have any idea how many transactions this company processes in a day?" "I know, sir, but this one." "It's part of a pattern," she pushed, emboldened by that flash of fear she'd seen. "There are dozens of payments like this, 2 shell companies. It adds up to millions of the charm vanished." His face became a cold, hard mask. "Are you an accountant, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "No, sir, but are you a forensic analyst? A member of our internal audit team?" "No." "Then what precisely are you?" he asked, stepping closer. His expensive cologne, a scent that now felt suffocating, filled the air. "You're a secretary. Your job is to answer phones and file paperwork. A job, I might add, that you seem to be neglecting in favor of cooking up these paranoid fantasies." He held up the paper she had given him. "This," he said with contempt, "is garbage." With a single, sharp tear, he ripped the page in half, then in half again, and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "I don't know what kind of pathetic little power trip you're on," he hissed, his voice now a whisper, but more menacing than a shout. "But it ends now. Go back to your desk and forget this. You will not speak of it to anyone. If I hear so much as a whisper that you're spreading these baseless, insubordinate accusations, you won't just be fired. I will personally see to it that you are escorted out of this building, and I will make sure your reputation is so trashed that you will never work in this city again. We don't tolerate hysterics at Oracorp. Am I making myself clear?" Sarah stood frozen, the torn paper at her feet. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. "Good," he said, his charming smile snapping back into place. He straightened his tie. "Have a productive afternoon?" He turned and stepped into the elevator, the doors hissing shut, leaving Sarah alone in the hallway, her world collapsing. He hadn't just dismissed her. He had threatened her, silenced her, and branded her as crazy. She was no longer just the invisible secretary. She was now a loose end he needed to tie up. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her time at Oracorp was about to come to a brutal end. Sarah went home that evening in a complete daze. Sterling's words echoed in her ears, paranoid fantasies, insubordinate, hysterics. He had made her feel not just wrong, but crazy. She walked into her small, tidy apartment, and the silence was overwhelming. She just knew that when she walked into the office tomorrow, a box would be waiting at her desk. Her security pass would be dead. She would be erased. For a moment, she thought about just letting it go, deleting the files, throwing away her notes, begging for her job. The thought of fighting back seemed impossible. It was her against Caspian Sterling, a man who could command boardrooms. The fight felt like it was already over. But as she sank onto her sofa, her eyes fell on her coffee table. It was covered in evidence. Neatly arranged printouts, charts she had drawn herself, and the 2 original damning pages. It wasn't a paranoid fantasy. It was real. The theft was real. $90 million. And he was getting away with it. The sheer injustice of it all began to burn away the fear, replacing it with a cold, hard resolve. If she was going down, she wasn't going down silently. That's when a conversation she'd overheard earlier clicked into place. 2 assistants had been buzzing by the coffee machine. "The Viridian deal is closing Friday," one had said. Right after the quarterly board meeting, the Viridian deal. A massive merger with a German tech conglomerate. Sterling was the architect. A ticking clock started in her head. Of course, the merger was his exit strategy. Once their books were combined with Viridian's, his $90 million fraud would be a needle in a continent-sized haystack, impossible to find. The merger wasn't just a deal. It was the getaway car. She had 2 days. Panic set in again, but this time it was focused. Who could she go to? The board. They loved Sterling. HR. They'd report her to Sterling. The authorities? It would take them months to get a warrant. She needed someone inside, someone with unquestionable authority, someone Sterling couldn't touch. Her mind raced. Then, an image surfaced from an old company newsletter she'd archived. Photo from the groundbreaking ceremony for the Oracorp Tower. In the center was a man with kind eyes and old-school integrity. Mr. Alistair Harrison, the founder, the chairman of the board. Harrison was a legend, now simmered. He rarely came into the office, but he was known for his fierce principles. He had built Oracorp from nothing on a foundation of trust. He would never let someone burn down his legacy. But how could she reach him? He was a ghost. She couldn't email or call. Then she remembered another boring task from months ago, sending out invites for the annual charity gala. She had compiled the mailing list, and on that list was a private home address for Mr. Alistair Harrison. It was a long shot. A crazy, desperate, last-ditch gamble. It was perfect. For the next few hours, Sarah worked with a focus she'd never known. She wasn't clumsy Sarah anymore. She was a woman on a mission. She took all her evidence and boiled it down into a slim, black binder. The first page was a simple flowchart showing how Oracorp was paying twice for the same services. With all roads leading to C. Sterling, the next pages had the clearest examples. The original ledger sheets and a final page with the grand total, $94.7 million. It was simple, direct, and undeniable. Clutching the binder, she drove her beat-up car to the wealthy suburbs. She found the address, but a tall iron gate blocked the entrance. There was an intercom. Her heart sank. What was she going to say? Just then, a delivery van pulled up behind her, and the gate began to swing open. A stroke of unbelievable luck. Without a second thought, she hit the gas and slipped in behind the van. She parked in the shadows. Her hand shaking, and walked up to the grand front door. She rang the bell, clutching the binder like a life raft. The door was opened by a stern-looking man. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone making it clear she didn't belong. Before she could answer, a voice called from inside. "Who is it, Robert?" An elderly man with a shock of white hair and sharp blue eyes appeared. It was him, Alistair Harrison. Sarah blurted out, "My name is Sarah Miller. I work at Oracorp. I am so sorry to bother you at home, but this is a critical emergency." Harrison looked her up and down her rumpled coat, her terrified eyes. He was about to dismiss her. She could see it on his face. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper, "please, 2 minutes. That's all I ask. If I'm wrong, you can have me arrested. But if I'm right, I will save your company." Something in her raw desperation cut through his skepticism. He gave a curt nod. "Let her in." 2 minutes, Ms. Miller." She was led into a grand study. Her 2 minutes had begun. She didn't stumble. She didn't stammer. She opened the binder. "Mr. Harrison, I'm just a secretary. But I know when things don't add up." She explained it. All the double payments, the shell companies, the signature. He has stolen almost $95 million. And I believe he plans to bury it all in the Viridian merger, which closes in 2 days. She showed him the proof. He listened in absolute silence, his eyes moving from the papers to her face, analyzing. When she finished, the room was silent. He leaned back in his chair. He saw no hysteria, no paranoia. He saw a terrified but determined woman who had risked everything to tell him the truth. He picked up his phone. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice calm but cold as ice. "Get me Marcus Thorne at Deloitte. I need his top forensic team at the Oracorp Tower at 6 a.m. No one gets in or out of the 48th floor." and get our head of security on the line. He hung up and looked at Sarah. Go home, Ms. Miller, he said, his voice softer now. Don't go into the office tomorrow. You've done enough. The next morning, Caspian Sterling arrived at Oracorp, ready for his day of triumph. He stepped off the elevator and walked into controlled chaos. Strangers in suits were everywhere, securing files and sealing offices. Two of them, with Oracorp's head of security, were waiting by his door. Mr. Sterling, one of them said, Mr. Harrison has ordered a full, immediate audit. We'll need you to come with us. The blood drained from Sterling's face. He was caught. By midday, the board knew everything. The hero CFO was exposed as a common thief. Sarah, meanwhile, was at home, pacing, expecting to be fired. When her phone rang, she almost didn't answer. Hello? Ms. Miller. Alistair Harrison here. His voice was warm. I thought you might like to know that Mr. Sterling has resigned. He is now helping federal investigators with their inquiries. It also seems, Ms. Miller, that you have single-handedly saved this company from ruin. Tears of relief streamed down Sarah's face. Your attention to detail is a rare and valuable asset, Harrison continued, and your courage is even rarer. We were blind, and you made us see. A week later, there was a new office on the executive floor. Right next to the new acting CFO, the plaque on the door didn't say secretary. It said Sarah Miller, head of process, integrity, and internal auditing. Her obsession with detail was now her job description. Her inability to ignore an error was now the company's greatest defense. She still occasionally spilled her coffee. But when she walked the halls now, executives didn't look past her. They looked at her. They saw the woman who noticed the single misplaced number. They saw the quietest person in the company. It roared. CTA in conclusion, Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear beige cardigans. Her story proves that true value is often overlooked. And courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. If you love stories like this, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell for more tales of corporate drama and unlikely heroes. What would you have done in her place? Let us know in the comments below. In a world that celebrates the loudest voice, we often forget to listen to the quiet observers. But sometimes, the most important person in the room isn't the one at the podium, but the one in the back who notices the one tiny detail everyone else missed. It's a lesson Oracorp, and especially Caspian Sterling, had to learn the hard way. And it's a powerful truth to remember. Never, ever underestimate the power of a quiet observation.